David Chen hasn't looked at another woman with romantic interest in 7 years, not since the morning his wife Sarah died in a hospital room that smelled of antiseptic and fading hope. He's 52 now, works as a civil engineer for the city of Portland, Oregon, drives the same grey sedan he's had since 2015, and eats dinner at exactly 6:30 every evening, usually something microwaved or ordered from the Thai place 3 blocks from his apartment. His daughter Emma, 26 and working as a graphic designer downtown, visits every Sunday with groceries he doesn't really need. And every Sunday she watches her father move through his apartment like a ghost, passing through rooms he no longer truly inhabits. She sees the way he straightens the picture frame on the bookshelf, the one with Sarah laughing at their anniversary dinner, adjusting it even though it's already perfectly level. She notices how he wears his wedding ring still, how he talks about work and the weather, but never about himself, never about tomorrow. Never about the possibility that life might hold something other than routine and memory. Emma worries. She worries in the quiet way children worry about parents who are slowly disappearing behind walls they've built from grief. She's mentioned it gently over the years, suggested maybe he could join a book club, try that hiking group his colleague mentioned, consider just having coffee with someone, anyone. He always smiles that patient smile and changes the subject, asking about her job, her boyfriend Marcus, whether she's still thinking about getting that certification she mentioned. He deflects with the practiced ease of someone who's become expert at avoiding his own life. But last month, something shifted in Emma. She was at her father's apartment, putting away the groceries while he made tea, and she saw him standing at the kitchen window, looking out at nothing, just standing there with an expression so hollow it physically hurt her to witness. That's when she decided she had to do something, even if it meant crossing a line she probably shouldn't cross. She started small, gathering information without seeming to. She asked about his college days, what music he listened to back then, what he used to dream about before life became so carefully managed and contained. She learned he'd wanted to travel to Japan, that he loved old architecture, that he used to read poetry, though he claimed he couldn't remember the last time he'd opened a book that wasn't a technical manual. She took mental notes, built a profile in her mind, and then one Tuesday evening after work, sitting in her apartment with Marcus making dinner in the kitchen, she opened a dating app called Second Chapter, designed specifically for people over 40 looking for meaningful connections. She created an account using her father's name, chose photos she'd taken of him over the past year when he wasn't paying attention, candid shots where he looked like himself, human and approachable rather than the closed-off version he presented to the world. She wrote his bio carefully, honestly, drawing from everything she knew about the man he used to be, and the man she believed he still could be, somewhere under all that protective numbness. The profile read, civil engineer with a passion for old buildings and new problems to solve, former poetry reader, aspiring traveller, current overthinker. Lost my best friend 7 years ago and forgot how to be myself. Trying to remember. Looking for someone patient, honest, someone who understands that starting over doesn't mean forgetting. Must like bad puns and good architecture. Bonus points if you can name a Neruda poem without Googling. Emma hesitated before adding that last part, wondered if it was too specific, too revealing, but something told her it was exactly right. She set the age range, the distance parameters, the basic preferences, and then she hit publish. Marcus came in with 2 plates of pasta, saw what she'd done, and raised his eyebrows. "He's going to kill you," Marcus said, not unkindly. Emma shrugged, took a bite of pasta and said, "Maybe. Or maybe he'll thank me. Either way, at least he'll feel something." The matches started coming within hours. Emma checked the app compulsively, swiping left on profiles that felt wrong. Women who seemed lovely, but somehow incompatible with her father's particular brand of quiet intensity. She was looking for something specific, though she couldn't articulate what until she saw it. 3 days after creating the profile, a match appeared that made her breath catch. The woman's name was Catherine Liu, age 50, a museum curator specializing in Pacific Northwest history. Her profile photo showed her standing in front of what looked like a historic building, wearing a rust-colored sweater and glasses, smiling the kind of smile that reached her eyes without trying too hard. Her bio was brief, but warmly written. Collector of stories, keeper of histories, believer in second chances and first coffees. I think buildings remember things we've forgotten. Let's talk about what we're trying to remember. Emma clicked on Catherine's full profile, scrolled through her other photos. There were pictures of her at museum exhibitions, one of her with what looked like her adult son, another of her laughing with friends at a restaurant. But it was the final photo that made Emma's heart stop. It was an older picture, clearly from 15 or 20 years ago, showing Catherine at what looked like a community fundraiser or charity event. She was standing with a group of women, and there, in the background, slightly out of focus but unmistakably present, was Emma's mother, Sarah Chen, wearing the blue dress she used to love, the one Emma remembered from her childhood. Emma zoomed in, her hand trembling slightly. There was no mistake. Catherine Liu had known her mother, or at least moved in the same circles, inhabited the same world. This wasn't just a random match. This was something else entirely, something that felt like fate or coincidence, or whatever you called it when the universe decided to interfere. Emma messaged Catherine immediately, staying in character as her father. She kept it simple. Your profile made me smile, which doesn't happen as often as it should. I'm intrigued by your idea that buildings remember things. I work with buildings every day and never thought of them that way. Would you want to grab coffee sometime and explain your theory? Catherine responded within an hour. I'd love to. Fair warning, my theories tend to require multiple coffees to fully explain. How's Saturday afternoon? There's a cafe near the History Museum called The Archive that seems appropriately themed, Emma confirmed, then immediately started panicking about what she'd done. She had 3 days to either confess to her father or let him walk into a coffee date he didn't know he had. The ethical implications were suddenly very real and very complicated. She chose a middle path, a sort of truth that was also a lie. On Thursday evening, she went to her father's apartment unannounced, which was unusual enough that he immediately looked concerned. Everything okay? He asked, letting her in. She nodded, then launched into the script she'd rehearsed. Dad, I need to tell you something, and you're probably going to be annoyed, but please hear me out. He sat down on the couch, looking wary. I have a colleague at work, Emma said, which was not technically true but not technically false either, since Catherine could theoretically be considered someone in the broader professional network. She's really lovely, around your age, works at the History Museum. I mentioned you to her, just in passing, talking about your work, and she seemed interested in maybe meeting for coffee. Would that be okay? I know it's weird and probably overstepping, but I just thought... She trailed off, trying to look hopeful and slightly embarrassed. David was quiet for a long moment. That particular kind of quiet that meant he was processing something complicated. Finally, he said, Emma, you don't need to set me up. I'm fine. But there was something in his voice that wasn't quite conviction, just habit. I know you think you're fine, Emma said carefully. But Dad, you're not living. You're existing. You're going through motions. And I'm not saying you need to fall in love or get married again or whatever. I'm just saying maybe have one cup of coffee with someone interesting and see if the world feels slightly less grey afterward, that's all. Just coffee. If it's terrible, you never have to do it again, and I'll never mention anything like this again. But if it's not terrible, if it's even just okay, then maybe it's worth it. What's the worst that could happen? An hour of your Saturday afternoon? David rubbed his face, a gesture Emma recognized from childhood, something he did when he was trying to find patience he didn't quite feel. When? He asked. Saturday at 2, the Archive Cafe, by the museum. He sighed, then nodded once. Fine, 1 coffee. But Emma, this is the last time, understood? She hugged him, relief flooding through her. Understood, thank you. Saturday arrived with that particular quality of late autumn in Portland, where the light is silver and the air smells like rain about to happen. David stood outside the archive for 5 minutes before going in, seriously considering just leaving, going home, pretending he'd forgotten or misunderstood. But he'd promised Emma, and he didn't break promises to his daughter, so he pushed open the door. The cafe was warm and crowded in that cozy way that felt almost suffocating, full of people typing on laptops and having animated conversations. He scanned the room, having no idea who he was looking for, since Emma had only said, "Her name is Catherine. She'll be by the window." There was only one woman sitting alone by a window, wearing a rust-colored sweater and reading what looked like a paperback novel. She was Asian, probably around his age, with short, silver-streaked dark hair and glasses. She looked up as if sensing his gaze, and their eyes met with that particular awkwardness of people who are pretty sure they're supposed to know each other, but aren't quite certain. David walked over, trying to project casual confidence he absolutely did not feel. "Catherine?" he asked. She smiled, standing up. "You must be David. Your daughter speaks highly of you." There was something in the way she said it, a slight emphasis on daughter, that made him pause. "I wasn't sure you'd actually come," Catherine continued, her tone friendly, but with an undercurrent of something else, amusement maybe, or knowing. "To be honest, when I realized Emma had created a whole dating profile for you, I almost cancelled. But curiosity got the better of me." The words hit David like cold water. "I'm sorry, what?" Catherine's expression shifted to concern. "Oh no. Oh God. She didn't tell you. She said she was going to tell you. Please don't be angry with her." "Sit down, let me explain." David sat, not because he wanted to, but because his legs suddenly felt unreliable. "Emma created a dating profile for me?" His voice was carefully controlled, the way it got when he was really angry but trying not to show it. Catherine nodded, looking genuinely apologetic. "On second chapter, about a week ago, we matched, started messaging, and after a few messages I realized something was off. The writing style didn't match the profile exactly, and there were these little tells, things that sounded like how a daughter would describe her father rather than how someone would describe themselves. So I asked directly if this was actually David Chen, or someone pretending to be him, and she confessed. She told me about you, about your wife, about how worried she is. And I know this is completely bizarre, and you have every right to leave right now. But she also told me she was going to confess before today, and arrange this as just a normal coffee meeting between 2 people her colleague thought might have things in common." David sat very still, processing layers of deception and good intentions tangled together in a way that made his head hurt. "And you still showed up? Why?" Catherine took off her glasses, cleaned them on her sweater, put them back on. It was a buying time gesture. David recognized it, because he did the same thing. "Because I looked at your profile before I knew it was fake, and it resonated with me. The part about trying to remember who you used to be. I'm a widow too, 5 years now. And because when Emma finally told me the truth, she was so earnest, so worried about you, that I couldn't help but be charmed. And also because—" She paused, pulled out her phone, scrolled through photos, then handed it to him. "Because I think I knew your wife, or at least we crossed paths. This was at a charity fundraiser in 2006, I think, Pacific Northwest Children's Alliance." David looked at the photo, and there was Sarah, young and vibrant, wearing that blue dress. His throat went tight. "I don't remember meeting you," he said, his voice rough. "No reason you would. We probably never actually spoke. I was new to the city, only been at the museum a couple of years. But I remember her, because she was one of those people who lights up a room, you know. She was laughing with someone about something, and I thought, that's the kind of person I want to be like. Someone who finds genuine joy in community events about children's literacy. Catherine's voice was soft, careful. When I saw her in the background of one of my old photos, and then saw your profile, saw your last name, saw that you'd lost someone 7 years ago, I did the math. So I guess I came today partly out of curiosity, but mostly because I wanted to tell you that your daughter loves you very much, and also because, if I'm being completely honest, I haven't had a genuine conversation with someone who understands loss in a long time, and maybe we both could use that. Even if it's just for an hour over coffee, we should probably actually order at some point. David felt something shift in his chest, some locked door starting to crack open. He could leave. He should probably leave, go home, call Emma, and have a very serious conversation about boundaries and trust. But the woman sitting across from him had kind eyes and a connection, however tangential, to Sarah, and she'd just said the thing he'd been too afraid to admit, that he was lonely for conversation with someone who understood what it meant to carry grief like permanent weight. "I need to be honest," he said. "I'm really angry at my daughter right now. And I'm also terrible at this, whatever this is. I haven't been on a date or anything resembling a date in almost 3 decades. I don't know what I'm supposed to say or do, and part of me wants to run out that door and pretend this never happened." Catherine nodded. "That's fair. For what it's worth, I'm pretty rusty too. My son tried to set me up with his friend's mother last year, and I hid in my office for a month. So maybe we can just both be terrible at this together and see what happens. No pressure, no expectations. Just 2 people who understand that starting over is hard, and having coffee that we should seriously order now because this is getting awkward." David laughed, surprising himself. It was a small laugh, more like a breath with sound, but it was real. "What do you recommend?" he asked. Catherine grinned. "The lavender latte is excellent, but if you're a coffee purist, you'll hate it. The regular drip is good if you want to play it safe. I'm getting the lavender because life's too short for safe coffee." David stood up. "I'll get them. Lavender for you, and I'll try one too. If I hate it, you're buying next time." The words were out before he realized what he'd said, the implication that there would be a next time. Catherine's smile widened. "Deal." He ordered at the counter, stood waiting for the drinks, and felt disoriented by his own emotions. Anger at Emma for overstepping, gratitude that she'd cared enough to try, fear that he was betraying Sarah somehow by standing in a cafe ordering lavender lattes with another woman. Hope, terrifying and fragile, that maybe Catherine was right about buildings remembering things, because maybe hearts did too, and maybe his heart could remember how to do this, how to be open to possibility. The barista called his name. He collected the drinks, returned to the table. Catherine was looking out the window at the street, the grey light making her profile look like something from a painting, thoughtful and self-contained. She turned when he sat down, took her latte and said, "Thank you. So tell me about buildings. Emma said you're a civil engineer. What's the most interesting project you've ever worked on?" They talked for 2 hours. David told her about restoring a historic bridge outside the city, the challenge of preserving original elements while meeting modern safety standards. Catherine told him about an exhibition she was curating about indigenous architecture in the Pacific Northwest, how structures carried cultural memory. They talked about books they'd read, or in David's case hadn't read in years. Catherine recommended poetry by Ada Limon, said it might resonate with someone trying to reconnect with that part of themselves. They carefully avoided talking about their losses until Catherine said, "Can I ask you something potentially intrusive?" David nodded. "Emma said you still wear your wedding ring. I'm not judging. I wore mine for 3 years after. But I'm curious what it means to you now. Is it armor or memory or both? David looked down at the gold band, turned it absently. Both, probably. When I first took it off, about 6 months after Sarah died, I felt like I'd lost her all over again. Like the ring was the only thing keeping her real. So I put it back on and decided it could stay until it felt right to remove it. That day hasn't come yet. Maybe it never will. Does that bother you? Catherine shook her head. No, I get it. Everyone moves through grief on their own timeline. Some people need to pack everything away immediately. Some people need to keep it all visible. There's no right way. My husband's toothbrush is still in the bathroom. I know I should probably throw it out, but I can't seem to make myself do it. It's just a toothbrush, but it's also proof he existed, that our life together was real. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the kind of silence that feels okay rather than awkward. Finally, David said, I should probably go talk to my daughter. We have some things to discuss. Catherine smiled. Go easy on her. She meant well, even if the method was questionable. David drove home feeling strange, unmoored, but not unpleasantly so. He'd exchanged numbers with Catherine, a gesture that felt monumental and terrifying. She'd suggested maybe they could see that museum exhibition together when it opened next month, if he was interested. He'd said yes before his brain could talk him out of it. Now he had to deal with Emma, who was probably at her apartment anxiously waiting to hear how it went. He called her from the car, put her on speaker. She answered on the first ring. Dad? How did it go? Are you okay? Are you furious? I know I should have told you the whole truth, but I was scared you wouldn't go, and I just wanted you to meet her because I had this feeling she might be someone worth knowing, and I'm sorry if I overstepped. I just love you and... Emma, he interrupted gently. Breathe. Come over tomorrow for dinner. We need to talk about boundaries and honesty. But also you should know that Catherine is lovely, and I'm going to see her again, and I'm not sure how I feel about any of this, but I'm feeling something, which is what you wanted, I think. There was a beat of silence, then Emma's voice thick with emotion. Really? You're going to see her again? David felt his chest go tight. Yeah, kid, I am. But we still need to talk about you creating fake profiles and lying to me, even if it was well-intentioned. That's not okay. Emma sniffed, clearly crying. I know. I'm sorry. I'll come over tomorrow and we'll talk. I love you, Dad. He smiled despite himself. I love you too. See you tomorrow. The next few weeks unfolded in a way that felt both cautious and inevitable. David saw Catherine twice more, once for lunch at a Vietnamese restaurant she recommended, once for that museum exhibition she'd mentioned. Each meeting felt slightly less terrifying than the last, though he still experienced low-level anxiety beforehand, worrying he'd forgotten how to do this, how to be interesting or interested or whatever you were supposed to be. But Catherine had a way of making conversation feel natural, asking questions that led to real answers rather than surface pleasantries. She wanted to know about his work, not just what he did, but why he'd chosen it, what solving structural problems taught him about life. She told him about her son Marcus, who was studying medicine on the East Coast, about how hard it was to parent from a distance, but also how proud she was of his independence. She mentioned her husband carefully, factually, not dwelling but not avoiding either. His name was James. He'd been a high school teacher. He died of a sudden heart attack while coaching soccer, just dropped on the field with no warning, no time to say goodbye. That's the hardest part, Catherine said over lunch. Not getting to say goodbye, not knowing the last time I saw him would be the last time. I keep playing back that morning, trying to remember if I said I love you when he left for work, and I think I did, but I'm not certain, and that uncertainty haunts me. David understood that haunting. Sarah had cancer. We had time, theoretically. She said everything she wanted to say, but the thing is, you never have enough time. Even when you know it's coming, even when you've said all the words, it still feels incomplete. There's always one more conversation you needed to have. They sat with that truth between them, heavy but shared. Then Catherine said something unexpected. "Do you think Sarah would want you to be doing this? Having lunch with me, I mean. Or would she be hurt?" David had been avoiding that question, the one that lived in the back of his mind during every interaction with Catherine. "I think Sarah would be furious that I stopped living for 7 years. She made me promise in the hospital that I wouldn't do that. She said life is too short and precious to spend in stasis, but promises made in hospital rooms are easier to make than keep." Catherine nodded. "James didn't get to make me promise anything, but I know he'd hate that I've been cautious about everything since he died. He was the adventurous one. I was always the careful planner. We balanced each other. Without him, I became all caution and no adventure. Maybe that's what this is, trying to recalibrate." David liked that word, recalibrate. It felt more accurate than moving on or starting over, both phrases that implied erasure. This was about adjustment, finding a new equilibrium that honored the past while allowing for a future. Their third meeting was the museum exhibition, and it was the first time David felt something shift from friendly to something else, something that made his pulse quicken in a way he'd forgotten was possible. Catherine guided him through the exhibition, explaining the cultural significance of longhouse architecture, how indigenous communities built structures that served as more than shelter. They were gathering places, storytelling spaces, physical manifestations of community and continuity. She was passionate when she talked about it, her hands moving expressively, her face animated. At one point, standing in front of a particularly beautiful photograph of a reconstructed longhouse at sunset, she touched his arm to draw his attention to a detail, and the contact, brief and innocent, sent electricity through him. He realized with a start that he was attracted to her, not just intellectually interested, but physically drawn to her presence, her voice, the way she inhabited space. The realization was disorienting and exhilarating and guilt-inducing all at once. After the exhibition, they walked through the park adjacent to the museum. It was early December now, cold but clear, the trees bare and the light fading early. Catherine wrapped her scarf tighter and said, "Thank you for coming today. I know museums aren't everyone's idea of fun." David shook his head. "I haven't enjoyed myself this much in years." "That sounds dramatic, but it's true. You make everything interesting." Catherine stopped walking, turned to face him. "David, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. What is this? What are we doing here? Because I like you. I like spending time with you. But I need to know if this is just two lonely people keeping each other company, or if it's something more, something that could become more, because I don't think I can do ambiguous anymore. Life's too short." Her directness caught him off guard. He stood there, aware of pedestrians walking past them, aware of his heart beating too fast, aware that his answer mattered. "I don't know what this is," he said finally. "I don't have language for it yet. But I know that I think about you when we're not together. I know that you make me want to remember how to be myself again. And I know that I'm terrified, because I don't know how to do this without feeling like I'm betraying Sarah. But I also know that she'd be disappointed in me for using her as an excuse to stay closed off. So I guess what I'm saying is I don't know what we're doing, but I'd like to keep doing it and see where it goes. If you're willing to be patient with someone who's extremely rusty and emotionally complicated." Catherine smiled, a full, genuine smile that made her eyes crinkle. "I can do patient, I can do complicated. But I need you to promise me something. If this starts feeling wrong to you, if you need to stop, you tell me. No ghosting, no slow fade, no avoiding, just honest conversation. Can you promise me that?" David nodded. "I promise." They kept seeing each other, falling into a rhythm of twice-weekly meetings that felt both comfortable and thrilling. Catherine introduced him to her favorite coffee shops, her preferred walking trails, her circle of friends who worked at the museum and various cultural institutions around the city. David felt himself expanding, his world growing larger after years of contraction, but he was also acutely aware that he was navigating this entirely without telling Emma, who still didn't know the extent of what she'd inadvertently started. He knew he needed to tell her, especially after their awkward conversation about boundaries, where he'd been vague about the specifics of his continued contact with Catherine. Emma knew they'd seen each other again, but not how often, not how significant it was becoming. The omission felt like its own betrayal, a reversal of her original deception. The situation came to a head 3 weeks before Christmas. Emma texted asking if she could bring Marcus to Sunday dinner, wanting her father to spend more time with the man she was getting serious with. David agreed, then impulsively, recklessly, invited Catherine too, thinking it would be good for Emma to see what her matchmaking had actually created. But he didn't tell Emma he'd invited Catherine, wanting to surprise her, which was a terrible idea, motivated by some complicated mix of pride and spite and genuine desire to share this new part of his life with his daughter. Sunday arrived. David made lasagna, his one reliable dish. Marcus arrived with Emma at 6:15, holding a bottle of wine and looking nervous, the way boyfriends do when meeting their girlfriends' fathers in domestic settings. They were making small talk in the living room when the doorbell rang. Emma looked confused. "Are you expecting someone else?" David's stomach dropped as he realized the potential disaster he'd created. "Yes, actually. Someone I wanted you to meet." He opened the door. Catherine stood there holding a dessert box from a bakery downtown, looking lovely in a dark blue sweater dress. Her smile faltered slightly when she saw David's expression. "Is this a bad time?" she asked quietly. Behind him, Emma appeared, curious about who was at the door. Her eyes went wide when she saw Catherine. "Oh my God, Catherine! From the museum? You're still seeing my dad? He didn't tell me it was... I mean, he said you'd met a couple times, but not that you were..." She trailed off, looking between Catherine and David with an expression of dawning realization and confusion. Marcus, ever diplomatic, stepped forward. "Hi, I'm Marcus, Emma's boyfriend. Please come in. I think there's some catching up to do, but there's wine and I'm told there's lasagna, so let's all just breathe and see what happens." The dinner was excruciatingly awkward for the first 20 minutes. Emma was quiet, processing. Catherine was carefully polite, clearly wondering if she should have declined the invitation. Marcus carried the conversation with questions about the museum and David's work, bless him. Finally, Emma set down her fork and said, "Dad, why didn't you tell me you were still seeing Catherine? I would have been happy. I am happy. I'm just confused why you didn't say anything." David took a breath, prepared to explain about boundaries and privacy, but Catherine spoke first. "That's my fault, Emma. I asked him to keep it quiet for a while. Not because I was ashamed or hiding, but because I needed to figure out what this was before it became something everyone knew about and had opinions on. Your dad was respecting my wishes." It was a generous lie, and David was grateful for it, even as he knew he shouldn't accept the cover she was providing. "That's not entirely true," he said. "Catherine did ask for privacy, but I also didn't tell you because I was still processing my feelings about the whole situation. The way we met, the fact that you created a dating profile for me without asking, the strangeness of starting something that began as a deception. I needed time to separate out what was real from what was engineered. And I needed space to be angry with you, Emma, because I am. What you did was a violation of trust, even if it was well-intentioned. You can't just manipulate people's lives because you think you know what's best for them." Emma's eyes filled with tears. "I know. I'm sorry. I was just so scared you were going to spend the rest of your life alone in that apartment, and I couldn't watch that happen. But you're right, I shouldn't have done it the way I did. I should have just talked to you, been honest." David felt his anger softening, the way it always did with Emma. She was his daughter, his only child, the person who looked like Sarah but had his stubborn determination. "The thing is," he said quietly, "I'm glad you did it. As angry as I am about the method, I can't regret the result. Catherine has become important to me. This, whatever it is, matters. But we need to establish that you don't get to meddle in my personal life anymore. I'm an adult. I get to make my own choices, even if they're choices you disagree with. Understood?" Emma nodded, wiping her eyes. "Understood, but for the record, I'm really happy it worked out. And I'm sorry I've been so pushy. I just love you and want you to be happy." Marcus cleared his throat. "Can I say something as the person with no emotional investment in the family dynamics here?" Everyone looked at him. "I think everyone at this table loves each other and means well, and maybe we can all just agree to start fresh from here with honesty and trust. Also, the lasagna is really good, and it's getting cold, so maybe we should eat and save the deep emotional processing for later." Catherine laughed, the tension breaking slightly. "I like him, Emma. He's got good priorities." Emma smiled despite the tears still on her face. "He does. Dad, I really am sorry, and I really do like Catherine. She's exactly the kind of person I hoped you'd find." Catherine reached across the table, took Emma's hand briefly. "Thank you for caring about your father enough to take such a big risk. And for the record, I don't think any of this happened by accident. Maybe your mum somehow arranged it. Maybe buildings remember things, and so do hearts. Maybe we all just got lucky. Whatever it is, I'm grateful." The rest of dinner went better, conversation flowing more naturally. Marcus told a funny story about a disastrous family Thanksgiving. Catherine shared a museum anecdote about a donor who insisted on lecturing the staff about artifacts he clearly knew nothing about. Emma slowly relaxed, watching her father and Catherine interact with cautious optimism. After dinner, Marcus insisted on doing dishes while David made coffee. In the kitchen, Catherine said quietly, "That was intense. Are you okay?" David nodded. "Better than okay. I should have told Emma weeks ago. I was avoiding it because I didn't know how to explain what we are to each other when I barely understand it myself." Catherine leaned against the counter. "So what are we to each other?" David considered the question, really thought about it. "I think we're two people who understand loss and are trying to figure out how to live fully despite it. I think we're proof that it's possible to honor the past while being open to the future. And I think I'm falling for you, which terrifies me." Catherine's expression softened. "I'm falling for you too. Also terrified, but less terrified than I was last month. So that's progress." David stepped closer, a move that felt both natural and monumentally significant. "Can I kiss you?" he asked. Catherine nodded. He kissed her carefully, gently, aware of Emma and Marcus in the next room, aware that this was a threshold he was crossing. It was brief, just a soft press of lips. But it felt like everything, like permission to move forward, like a promise that he could do this without forgetting Sarah, without betraying the life he'd had. When they separated, Catherine was smiling. "That was worth the wait," she said. David smiled back. "Sorry it took so long. Good things are worth waiting for." They returned to the living room, where Emma and Marcus were sitting on the couch, looking at something on Marcus's phone. Emma looked up, saw something in her father's face, and grinned. "So things are good?" she asked. David sat in the armchair across from them. "Things are good, complicated but good." Catherine settled on the arm of his chair, a casual gesture that nevertheless felt significant. "I should probably head out," she said. "Early morning tomorrow. But thank you for inviting me, David. And Emma, Marcus, it was really lovely to officially meet you both." Emma stood up. "Can I walk you out?" Catherine looked surprised, but nodded. David watched them go, wondering what his daughter wanted to say. In the hallway outside the apartment, Emma said, "I need you to know something. When I created that profile, I looked through every photo on my dad's computer, trying to find ones that showed who he really was. And I found this folder he'd hidden not very well, called Sarah Memories. It was full of photos and videos, notes she'd written him, all these pieces of their life together. And in one of the folders, there was a document called For David If Something Happens. I know I shouldn't have read it, but I did." Catherine waited, sensing this was important. She wrote him a letter. It was instructions, basically. Practical stuff about finances and the house, but also this whole section about moving forward. She told him she wanted him to find love again, that she couldn't stand the thought of him being alone. She said any woman who could make him laugh again would have her blessing. And she said Emma would probably try to help, and he should let her because that's what daughters do. Emma's voice cracked. "So when I created that profile, I wasn't just meddling. I was trying to honor her wishes. I wanted him to know it was okay to be happy again. And I think you make him happy. I can see it in the way he looks at you, the way he talks. He's coming back to life. So thank you for being patient with him and with me and with this whole weird situation." Catherine pulled Emma into a hug. "Your mother sounds like she was an incredible woman. Thank you for trusting me with your father. I promise I'll take care of his heart." They separated. Emma wiped her eyes. "He's going to take the ring off soon, I think, the wedding ring. Just be prepared for that. It's going to be hard for him." Catherine nodded. "I'll be ready." Christmas came 2 weeks later. David spent Christmas Eve with Emma and Marcus, a tradition he didn't want to break. But Christmas Day, for the first time in 7 years, he had plans that didn't involve sitting alone in his apartment with memories and too much wine. Catherine had invited him to her house for dinner, nothing fancy, just the two of them. He arrived at 5 with a bottle of wine and a nervousness that felt simultaneously ridiculous and justified. Catherine's house was a small craftsman in the Selwood neighborhood, decorated simply but warmly. There were photos on the walls, her son, her late husband, moments captured and displayed without apology. David appreciated that she hadn't hidden James away. In the living room, on the mantel, stood a framed photo of a man in his late 40s, handsome, with kind eyes, wearing a soccer coaching jacket. "That's James," Catherine said, seeing David looking. "Handsome guy," David said, meaning it. "He was. I miss him every day, but missing him and loving you aren't mutually exclusive. I'm learning that." She said it simply, matter-of-factly, and the words hit David with stunning force. Love. She'd said love. "Did you just say you love me?" he asked, needing to be certain he'd heard correctly. Catherine looked startled, as if she hadn't realized what she'd said, then laughed. "I did. Apparently I'm saying it for the first time while standing in my living room on Christmas Day, having just pointed out my dead husband's photo. Very romantic of me." David set down the wine bottle, took her hands. "I love you too. I've been trying not to say it because I thought it was too soon, but if we're being honest in inappropriate settings, then yes, I love you. You make me want to be present in my life instead of just passing through it. You remind me that there's beauty in risk and possibility, and you make me laugh, which Sarah specifically said was important, according to Emma." Catherine looked confused. "What?" David explained about the letter, the instructions Sarah had left, Emma's confession to Catherine. They stood in the living room, holding hands and crying a little, laughing a little, acknowledging the complicated, beautiful mess of loving someone new while honoring someone gone. "I want to take off my ring," David said suddenly. Not because you asked or because I think I should, but because I'm ready. It's been enough time. I'll always love Sarah, but I'm ready to love you too, fully and without hedging. Would it be okay if I did that now? Catherine squeezed his hands. Of course. Whatever feels right to you. David slipped the ring off his finger for the second time in 7 years, and this time it felt right, felt like a choice rather than a betrayal. He put it in his pocket, intending to take it home, put it somewhere safe with the other pieces of his life, with Sarah. His hand felt strange without it, lighter, vulnerable. Catherine raised his left hand to her lips, kissed where the ring had been. "Thank you for trusting me with your heart," she said. David pulled her close, held her the way he hadn't let himself hold anyone since Sarah died. They stood like that for a long moment, two people who'd survived loss and found each other on the other side. Dinner was simple, roasted chicken and vegetables, nothing elaborate. They ate and talked about their plans for the new year. Catherine wanted to visit her son on the East Coast. David offered to come along if that wasn't too much too soon. She said she'd like that. They discussed a trip to Japan, maybe next fall, that dream David had mentioned in his profile that Emma had created. They talked about practical things too, like whether they were ready to tell other people, Catherine's museum colleagues, David's co-workers, how they wanted to navigate being a couple in their 50s when everyone had opinions about what that should look like. "I don't want to rush anything," David said, "but I also don't want to hide. I spent 7 years hiding from life. I'm done with that." Catherine agreed. "Let's just be honest and see what happens. That's all we can do." After dinner, they moved to the living room, sat on the couch with coffee and the cookies Catherine had made. Outside, it had started to rain, that particular Portland rain that sounds like static against windows. David felt peaceful in a way he'd forgotten was possible, content in the present moment without anxiety about the future or guilt about the past. "Can I ask you something?" Catherine said. "Of course. What do you think Sarah would think of me? Honestly." David considered the question seriously. "I think she'd like you. You're smart and kind, and you don't take yourself too seriously. You make me think, and you make me laugh. And most importantly, you understand that loving someone who's lost someone means holding space for that loss. You don't ask me to pretend Sarah never existed. You don't feel threatened by my memories. That's rare." "Sarah would appreciate that." Catherine was quiet for a moment. "James would like you too. He always said I needed someone who could match my intensity about weird historical details without making me feel like I was boring them. You actually care about indigenous architecture and building preservation. He'd approve." They sat in comfortable silence, rain providing ambient sound. Then David said, "I need to say something difficult. I'm going to mess this up sometimes. I'm going to have hard days where I miss Sarah so much it physically hurts, and those days might have nothing to do with you, but will affect us anyway. I might pull away or get distant or forget to communicate. I'm working on it. But I need you to know I'm going to be imperfect at this." Catherine shifted to face him. "And I'm going to have days where I'm so anxious about losing another person I love that I become controlling or clingy or weird. I'm going to probably overthink everything and ask if we're okay approximately 500 times a year. I'm going to compare you to James sometimes, not because you're lacking, but because he's my reference point for partnership. We're both going to be imperfect. That's not a reason to not try. That's just reality." David kissed her, deeper this time, letting himself feel the full weight of what was happening, this new relationship, this second chance neither of them had been looking for, but both desperately needed. They saw each other regularly through January and February, their relationship deepening in ways both small and significant. Catherine started keeping a toothbrush at David's apartment, a gesture that made him think about his conversation with her, about his own inability to throw away Sarah's toothbrush. He'd finally done it, not erasing her, but making room for someone new. David met Catherine's son Marcus during his spring break, a slightly surreal experience since Marcus was dating Emma, making their combined family situation even more complicated and oddly perfect. The four of them had dinner together, and David watched Emma and Marcus with Catherine's son and his girlfriend, and thought about how strangely life unfolds, how a daughter's well-intentioned deception had created something real and lasting. In March, David and Catherine took a weekend trip to the coast, stayed in a small bed and breakfast in Cannon Beach. They walked on the beach in the morning, cold and grey and beautiful. Catherine took photos of the rock formations for a museum project. David just watched her, this woman who'd unexpectedly become central to his life. That evening, sitting by the fire in their room, Catherine said, "I think I'm ready to meet your friends, the ones you've been carefully keeping me separate from." David had been doing that, keeping Catherine away from his established social circle, worried about judgment or questions or having to explain their origin story. "You're right," he said. "I've been compartmentalizing. That's not fair to you." "I'm not hurt," Catherine said. "I understand the instinct to protect something new, but I think we're past new now. I think we're building something real, and that means integrating our lives, not keeping them parallel." The following month, David hosted a dinner party, invited his closest friends from work, the couple he and Sarah had been friends with for decades. It was the first time he'd entertained since Sarah's death, and the preparation was emotionally complicated. Catherine helped him cook, her presence making the process feel less like resurrection of old rituals and more like creation of new ones. His friends arrived, clearly curious about Catherine, carefully polite. But as the evening progressed, David watched them relax, saw them warming to Catherine's intelligence and humor, accepting that David was moving forward. His friend Tom, who'd been his groomsman at his wedding to Sarah, pulled him aside in the kitchen and said, "She's great, David. Really, Sarah would approve." David felt his throat tighten. "Thanks, that means a lot. You seem happy. Actually happy, not just going through motions. That's all any of us wanted for you." Summer arrived, and with it plans for Japan. They spent weeks planning the trip, researching temples and gardens, booking a mix of traditional ryokans and modern hotels. Emma helped with the planning, excited for her father, teasing him about being a tourist with a guidebook. The trip itself was transformative. David had wanted to see Japan for 30 years, had dreamed about it with Sarah, but never gone. Now he was here with Catherine, walking through Kyoto's bamboo forests, exploring Tokyo's chaos, sitting in quiet contemplation at ancient temples. One evening, in a traditional inn in the mountains, they sat on the floor of their room, drinking sake and talking about everything and nothing. "Thank you for this," David said. "For what?" "For being patient while I figured out how to do this, for not giving up when I was complicated and closed off, for taking a chance on a guy whose daughter had to create a fake dating profile because he was too stubborn to do it himself." Catherine smiled. "Thank you for letting me in, for taking off the ring when you were ready, for introducing me to your friends and your daughter and all the parts of your life, for coming to Japan with me and letting me witness you doing something you've dreamed about, for being brave enough to try again." They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the sounds of the mountain, the distant running water, the wind in the trees. David thought about Sarah, felt her presence not as ghost or guilt, but as gratitude. He was grateful